The French Prime Minister is booed in Nice and called a murderer by residents upset at Thursday's terror attack. Can the French or any of the Western world's politicians contain the crises they now confront? Good evening from Cleveland, Ohio, where amid violence at home and abroad, America's Republicans are today beginning their convention to nominate Donald Trump to be their presidential candidate and potentially America's commander-in-chief. Does he have the answer to any of the domestic and foreign challenges that he'll face if he becomes president in November? The theme here tonight, Make America Safe Again. The keynote speaker, his own wife, Melania Trump. We also report tonight from Nice, France's anguish after the third deadly terror attack in 18 months. From Turkey tonight, remarkable new pictures emerge of Friday night's attempted coup. CCTV of the intelligence HQ being attacked from the air. Today, President Erdogan continued with his counter-coup, suspending 8,000 police officers allegedly linked to Friday's coup. And from here in the United States, we report an attack threatening further racial division. The Marine veteran accused of killing 3 police officers in Baton Rouge had posted messages online urging African Americans to fight back, whilst others affected by violence just plead for it to stop.
We don't call for no bloodshed. That's how this all started, with bloodshed. We don't want no more bloodshed.
These just some of the challenges facing delegates here and their presumptive presidential candidate, Donald Trump.
Here, Britain's Prime Minister says she's got an insurance policy in times of trouble. Theresa May urges MPs to back the renewal of the Trident nuclear deterrent, saying she'd be prepared to authorise a nuclear strike which would kill 100,000 people. Labour remains deeply divided on that, but the party is nearing a deal on who should challenge Jeremy Corbyn for leader. And 80 billion chips with everything from phones to tablet computers. The British company which designed the technology is bought for £24 billion by a Japanese multinational. So what happened to the PM's pledge to block foreign takeovers?
By any standards, the events in Turkey, in France, and right here in America in the past 3 days provide an awful backdrop to this convention. But let's begin not here, but in France, where there was first fear, then grief, and now anger, as people stood in silence to remember the victims of the Bastille Day lorry attack in Nice. Jeers broke out from the crowd, frustrated with their government's inability to fight terrorism. Porrick O'Brien has been speaking to the family of one of the victims.
The French Prime Minister arrived in Nice today for a minute's silence to remember the dead. There was silence eventually, but not before Prime Minister Valls was booed. Nothing like it had been seen before. There were even shouts of assassins resign. The minute's silence, though, when the time arrived, was just that. Away from the crowds, a mile up the promenade, the family of Fatima Charri. Yasmina, her 14-year-old youngest child, put down a flower where her mother was hit and killed. The children's hospital behind her. At her house, Yasmina shows us her favourite selfies with her mother. She's surrounded by extended family, like her cousin.
And my aunt died before the children's hospital, where she
was hit in front of the children's hospital.
Exactly. Yeah. And in that hospital, she delivered Yasmina.
That's where Yasmina was born.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Back on the promenade, on the spot where Fatima's killer died, for floral tributes, people threw rubbish. 6 people are still being questioned in connection with the attack. Today, 3 of them were transferred to Paris for further questioning. The French prosecutor reiterated today that as of yet no direct links with Islamic State have been established. He went on to say that the killer had grown a beard in the run-up to the attacks.
And this man is not a Muslim. If you're he isn't even human. He isn't even human. So he only represents himself. I can promise you, if we stop giving them attention, if we stop giving them a name, like state, Islamic State, they're not a state, they're crazy people. The solution to these attacks are, we need to be one. We need to be, we need to stay together. We need to be united. We are all people. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim, if you're Jewish, if you're a Christian, if you're an atheist, or if you're from France or from Holland or from Syria or from Palestine. It doesn't matter. Lives are lives.
In atrocities, sometimes detail gets lost. For this family, detail is important. Like the fact that these two boys, Fatima's grandchildren, were there when she was mown down, and now keep drawing pictures of lorries. More detail, this time about Fatima herself. She loves surprising people. Like the time she flew all the way to Amsterdam to visit her sister Aisha without telling her.
Do you expect her to walk back in the door?
Every moment. Every moment. I think we all do.
Yasmina, sitting with her family, comes across a mix of shocked and strong.
She said that the first day she cried too much, and now she said that it's enough.
Her tears are done. She doesn't have tears anymore to cry.
Whatever motivated a man to leave a family without Fatima, the polar opposite to what motivated her.
Well, from the political backlash in France to the purge in Turkey after Friday's failed coup, almost 20,000 officials from the police, the army, the judiciary, the civil service have now been arrested or suspended. Western leaders, including the US Secretary of State, have warned Turkey to show respect for human rights and the rule of law. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Jonathan Rugman, is in Ankara. Jonathan.
John, President Erdogan has not yet returned here to his capital, Ankara, but you can be sure that when he does, a massive party will be thrown for him, and in fact it seems already to have started. They are celebrating not just the survival of his presidency, but as they see it, the survival of Turkish democracy as well. But how safe is that democracy as a massive purge of the president's potential critics is underway? On top of the thousands of people who've been arrested, 30 regional governors have been sacked, and all the civil servants in the country, that's 3 million people, have been put under a travel ban so that they can't leave the country in case there is a potential coup plotter amongst them. As for Fethullah Gulen, the cleric in Pennsylvania, whom Erdogan accuses of being behind this attempted coup, well, the Turks are still demanding his extradition, and the Americans are saying, well, you've got to give us some evidence first. Military helicopters are still banned from flying over Istanbul, and they've been warned that they will be shot down if they attempt to do so, as more visual evidence still emerges of this dramatic coup attempt. The pictures are mute, but there's no mistaking the ferocity of this battle. The scene is the headquarters of Turkish intelligence, where those guarding it are firing at rebel helicopters. One branch of the state at war with another. This is CCTV footage bizarrely released by Turkey's spy agency, ever loyal to President Erdogan. The cradle of any democracy is its parliament, and the lobby of this one is a ruin. Just after 20 to 3 on Saturday morning, it was bombed repeatedly by rebel jets and helicopters from Turkey's own air force. This morning, MPs and their staff were wandering around in disbelief at this extraordinary act of betrayal. Turkey is not Syria or Iraq, but for a few tumultuous hours, this NATO member on Europe's doorstep appeared to be heading in that direction. This attack was a direct assault on Turkey's parliamentary democracy, a rare and precious thing in this part of the world. But the fear is that the president's response to it is turning into a witch hunt, which will make this place weaker and not stronger. This roundup goes way beyond the usual suspects. Not just these senior military officers, but thousands of other civil servants either detained or sacked. Nearly 8,000 police have been suspended. These are the alleged ringleaders, some of their faces bruised. Are you happy? They are asked sarcastically. They give their names and ranks, mostly generals and admirals, before they shuffle away. When some appeared in court today, panic broke out. A man believed to be a soldier started shooting before he was arrested, and many Turks say they want the ringleaders dead. Mehmet Koçakaya was one of those killed when a helicopter opened fire on civilians below. His parents told me their 22-year-old son had climbed on top of a tank to stop the coup, and that his killers were traitors.
There is no need to arrest them. You should just put them in the square and hang them and move on.
My son saved the country. He didn't side with the gangsters, but stood with the state.
This is Ankara's police headquarters, also strafed by rebel aircraft. Faced with this destruction and loss of life, President Erdogan has suggested that the death penalty, abolished 12 years ago, may be brought back. But Yaşar Yakış, Erdogan's first foreign minister before he was expelled from the party for disloyalty, believes the president sees this crisis as an opportunity not to be wasted. Are you worried Turkey is becoming essentially one-man elected rule?
It is going in that direction, and I hope that at some stage this evolution has to be stopped.
But it doesn't look like it's going to be stopped. The president's getting stronger from the failed coup.
But there is a general golden rule in social sciences which says that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the more the power becomes absolute, the more it corrupts the leader.
Is that what's happening in Turkey?
So far, yes, this rule played a very important role in the political career of Erdogan.
Is Mr. Erdogan going mad? I mean, is he obsessed? Is he crazed with keeping power?
Mad, no, but he is capitalizing on it. He's very pragmatic and doesn't miss any opportunity.
If he's right, so much more than physical damage may be inflicted here. The very fabric of Turkey's democracy is now at risk. President Erdogan not just changing the guard, but recasting it in his own image. Jonathan Rugman, Channel 4 News, Ankara.
Well, now, President Erdogan's retaliation against the alleged coup plotters is causing huge headaches for Turkey's EU and NATO allies. They've voiced concerns over the thousands of arrests, the talk of reinstating the death penalty, and international editor Lindsay Hilsum joins us now from Istanbul. Now, Lindsay, what are the sort of central concerns in Washington and Brussels following this extraordinary 48 hours?
Well, John, I think you can see and hear the enthusiasm of President Erdogan's supporters in Taksim Square behind me. It's not an enthusiasm that Western leaders and diplomats are sharing today. One of the senior EU diplomats said today that he was very worried that all of these massive arrests and sacking of civil servants meant that President Erdogan was acting on lists which had been prepared before. In other words, people who he has regarded for a long time as his enemy, who have absolutely nothing to do with the coup. There's also been talk of reinstating the death penalty here. That would sound the death knell to any hope Turkey might have of joining the European Union one day. And both the EU Foreign Policy Chief and the US Secretary of State expressed their concern today.
No country can become a EU member state if it introduces that penalty. That is very clear in our acquis, as we call it.
We also firmly urge the government of Turkey to maintain calm and stability throughout the country. And we also urge the government of Turkey to uphold the highest standards of respect for the nation's democratic institutions and the rule of law. And we will certainly support bringing the perpetrators of the coup to justice, but we also caution against a reach that goes well beyond that.
They represent nearly half our nation's president and a majority of the current Congress. Well, now, Turkey is an incredibly important member of both NATO and other international alliances. I mean, the big question is, what effect is this having on IS and the attempt to weed them out?
Well, certainly, I was talking to somebody who works with the Turkish military today who said that relations between the Turkish army and other NATO armies had been improving tremendously. Well, that has all gone by the board now. And there's a huge concern in NATO because Incirlik Air Base, which is where US flights take off to bomb Islamic State in Syria, that was involved in the coup. They did refueling of some of the dissident aircraft there. And the leader of the Turkey's second army in control of the borders with Iran, Iraq and Syria, he is one of those who has been arrested for involvement in this coup. So I think that shows how much concern that there is. And more broadly, I think there's a lot of worry now that there's going to be increasing hostility from President Erdogan's government against the West. They blame America for a lot of things. They blame America for giving exile to the cleric. They blame for this coup attempt. I think we're going to see a lot of hostility against the West from President Erdogan's government in the coming weeks.
Lindsay Hilsum. Lindsay, in Istanbul, thank you very much. Well, here in Cleveland, the Republican Party faithful are gathering, as you can hear in the background, in a city where carrying a tennis ball or a piece of string near the convention is banned, but where toting a semi-automatic rifle is perfectly fine. Another paradox as the country struggles to deal with yet another fatal shooting of police. Donald Trump, who will be anointed as the party's presidential nominee, describing America as a divided crime scene. An America where the issues of race and law and order now overshadow everything. With me now, our Washington correspondent, Kylie Morris. It is a pretty amazing backdrop for such a vital, political moment.
Exactly. I mean, even as we launch into the full kind of colour and movement of the convention, outside this place, flags are flying at half-mast, and they have been flying there for what feels like weeks. Remember, we had Orlando, 49 people killed there. We had the killing of 6 police officers in Dallas. There have been multiple killings of black men by white police officers, and now these tragic events yesterday in Baton Rouge. That is the backdrop, but it seems that that is something the Trump machine here is very much keen to take advantage of.
Well, the one thing we know of Mr. Trump is his rhetoric. Is there any evidence that any of his rhetoric has done anything to ameliorate the huge divide and the great tension that now exists in American society?
I'm not sure the calculation is that there's an advantage for him in ameliorating it. I think we've seen in the past that he wants to sell himself as the law and order candidate. Given that, a sense of crisis is potentially advantageous to him. There are protests happening outside this building now, and his people are saying, look, the bigger the protest, the better it is. So for that reason, I think we will see the same kind of rhetoric continuing, particularly after the terrible events of Baton Rouge yesterday.
Another seismic shock to the American psyche.
Shot fire, officer down! Shot fire, officer down!
In Baton Rouge, 3 more police officers shot and killed. Violence wrought by a veteran of the Iraq War, armed with an assault weapon, and rage at police killings of black citizens. But the aunt of Alton Sterling, killed 2 weeks ago by white police in Baton Rouge, answered not in his name.
We don't call for no bloodshed. That's how this all started, with bloodshed. We don't want no more bloodshed.
A cri de coeur to lift the curtain on the most divisive Republican convention in nearly 50 years. Protests last night were muted, demonstrators almost outnumbered by police cyclists looking straight out of a Marvel franchise. Their carapace built perhaps with open carry in mind, the laws that allow citizens to carry their assault rifles openly in the streets.
And I also know this good man would listen.
This baronial display, the nominee and his vice presidential pick, was meant to set the tone for Cleveland. But it got messy when Donald Trump was asked whether his ban on Muslims is unconstitutional.
So not Muslims. The Constitution, there's nothing like it. But it doesn't necessarily give us the right to commit suicide as a country. And if people want to come in, they're going to be extreme vetting. We're going to have extreme vetting.
You're on the same page on that. Clearly, this man is not a politician. He doesn't speak like a politician.
He's done pretty well.
He speaks from his heart.
I think that's a good thing.
He speaks from his heart. And
well, I think I speak from my heart and my brain, just so we understand. A lot of people speak from their heart.
Right.
This is maybe more important.
Bikers for Trump rolled into the city centre today, delighted their guy is the guy. They see themselves as a backup security force should the candidate need extra protection.
We have a lot in common.
When he's not campaigning, their leader, Chris Cox, carves wood sculptures and reflects on a president who'll put America first.
We have to protect and fortify the boundaries of America. Okay, right now we have soldiers who are waiting in line for medical care that are dying. We can't somehow find the funds to fix things. We have to spend our money to fortify the people within our boundaries. Then and only then can we start to be a hotel for the rest of the world.
Cleveland had planned for its hotels to be filled to capacity this week, but tourists and their pets can still get a room. Headline conservatives have stayed away, taking their distance from the Trump juggernaut.
People here call him a fascist, a racist, misogynistic, economic failure with no foreign policy. Those things come to mind.
Hanif Phelps stands on a street corner railing against Trump and trying to remind Americans what binds them together.
A smile. When I'm smiling, you're smiling. We look like each other, you know, and Trump would focus on your color of your skin and my color, not the fact that we're smiling and hugging each other. And just his whole mission is just divisive, you know.
Well, joining me now, the former chairman of the Republican National Committee, Michael Steele, and the New York Times columnist, Maureen Dowd. And let me begin with you, Michael Steele. We just ended that report there from Kylie Morris, in which she spoke to a young black man down in Baton Rouge, and he said that Mr. Trump is a candidate for divisiveness.
Look, that's a legitimate issue to raise. I mean, I think some of the early rhetoric of the campaign was divisive, or at least misleading for a lot of people. They didn't appreciate it, didn't understand why he was saying some of the things he said. This week, I think, is a chance for him to sort of turn that narrative around. I think it's why you'll see his leading with his family, coming out and sort of laying down the kind of man he is, the kind of principles he has. But I think those types of feelings and concerns that are out across America will have to be addressed in this campaign. There's no doubt about that. You cannot.
Well, does he need to address them here?
This is where you start. This is where you start. I mean, if you haven't done it up to now, you cannot come out of the convention
with
that hanging up. Well, yeah, I think he is, because you think about, and not just to me, but to a lot of Republicans who are beginning to raise these particular concerns. But with Donald Trump, you never know. You know, at the end of the day, he could very well just go in a different direction.
Well, now,
but this is important for him.
Maureen Dowd, you have interviewed him, you've spent time with him, and you've written at times quite kindly about him. Does he understand the nature of the divide and the danger of rhetoric?
No, he's mining that divide. And in fact, he's going to base his convention speech on Nixon's convention speech in '68, which was about trying to get the silent majority. You know, Nixon wanted to get the white voters in the North, and George Wallace was going to get the white voters in the South. And so it's all about mining those divisions. But I don't even know if it's that Donald Trump is a racist like George Wallace. It's that he wants the roar of the crowd. So he's basically moving toward anything that gets him the roar of the crowd.
I mean, the problem is, he's not a politician.
No.
He's unlikely ever to be one. I mean, he may be president, but he won't be a politician. He'll be an actor, really.
But as we've seen, not just here but around the globe, that seems to be what the electorate wants. They want people who aren't professional politicians, because the professional political class has let them down. They've been lied to. They've been cheated in some respects. They look at the economy and go, how does the rich get richer and the poor stay poor? So that even for someone like Donald Trump, who's a populist, is an opening for a different conversation.
Well, yeah, but you need a party in order to have that conversation. You need all sorts of senators and Republicans. At least 12 senators are not coming here at all. Some have actually admitted they're going fishing. You know.
But I tell you something, that doesn't hurt Donald Trump.
No, but it hurts the international community. I mean, we're dealing with a world that's going up in flames. Turkey, France, Baton Rouge. How does a man like Donald Trump manage these things?
Well, you know, even historians, American historians who have always stayed neutral, like David McCullough, came out the other day and called him a monstrous clown. And the co-writer of The Art of the Deal, Tony Schwartz, did an interview today and said that he's a dark hole and that if he has his fingers on the nuclear button, we're all lost. But it's, you know, as Harry Truman said, it's hard to tell how presidents are going to take that responsibility until they have it.
Right. Well, I mean, let me ask you a candid question. Sure. You, as an African American and a hugely respected former chairman of this party, do you sleep easily at night?
Yeah. Why wouldn't I?
Because you are about to see something that you, certainly when you were in office, have never seen.
Yeah, this is true, but it's no worse. I don't put this up there with, you know, the things that my community and others in this country have gone through. Donald Trump we're not lynching black people with trees. We're not taking down communities of people the way this history of the party has been, or the history of the country has been. Look, the bottom line, I sleep well at night, all right? I will sleep well whether it's Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, because at the end of the day, the American people have this unique spirit. Yeah, we go through our trials. We have people who say things that, you know, they feel passionate about, and that's good. But at the end of the day, this is going to be, we'll be okay. I'm not worried about that.
I can ask you the same question.
Well, I was telling you before that I think part of what made Trump successful is that Americans have what I would call a Coriolanus yearning. They yearn for the strong, successful American outside of politics, not a political hack.
Fed to them through television, online, and the rest?
Well, I was saying that's what happened with Ross Perot, and that's what happened with Trump, because he played a strong, successful businessman on TV in The Apprentice. So that's what Americans thought he was. And now there's a lot of contrarian evidence on that. But Paul Manafort has called this convention the ultimate reality show. It is the ultimate merger of show business and politics, which has been coming since Joe Kennedy.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's been coming for a long time. This space, and again, you know, I know a lot of focus is here in America, but, you know, you look at Boris Johnson in Great Britain. But I'm just saying, do you sleep well at night?
Not particularly.
Well, okay, so that's the choice you make. And that's the individual choice that clearly a lot of Britons have made about leaving the EU. It's the same choice that a lot of Americans are making about who the next president is going to be.
Michael Steele, Maureen Dowd, thank you both very warmly indeed. More from here later in the programme, but for now, let's go back to Kathy in London.
Thanks, John. Sleep well. Theresa May has told MPs that if necessary, she would be prepared to press the nuclear button. She was making her first speech in the Commons as Prime Minister as MPs debated whether to build 4 new submarines to carry Britain's Trident nuclear missiles. The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, who said he would never authorise a nuclear strike, was repeatedly asked by his own backbenchers to support Labour's current policy of renewing the deterrent. But Mr Corbyn insisted he wanted a nuclear-free world. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, reports.
Theresa May on her first visit to Wales as Prime Minister, meeting Carwyn Jones this morning. Mrs May raced back from Cardiff, though, for the first parliamentary vote of her premiership. A dead-cert victory devised by her predecessor as a moment to scatter a divided Labour Party in confusion. The Commons will vote at 10 o'clock tonight on commissioning 4 successor submarines to the Vanguard subs currently carrying the nuclear deterrent. They take 14 years to build and test. Some have described the technology as more complicated than lunar landings. The costings at the moment stand at £31 billion, with a £10 billion contingency fund set aside.
With the acquisition costs spread over 35 years, this is effectively an insurance premium of 0.2% of total annual government spending. That's 20 pence in every £100 for a capability that will protect our people through to the 2060s and beyond.
Labour MPs quickly turned on their own leadership in the debate, just as the Tories had hoped.
Will she be reassured that whatever she is about to hear from our front bench, it remains steadfastly Labour Party policy to renew the deterrent while other countries have the capacity to threaten the United Kingdom?
Jeremy Corbyn himself, a lifelong unilateral disarmer, said he would vote against the submarine contract.
I will actually be voting against this motion tonight, Mr. Speaker, which I'm sure will be of an enormous surprise to the whole House. I just think we should pause for a moment, Mr. Speaker, and think of the indiscriminate nature of what nuclear weapons do and the catastrophic effects of their use anywhere.
Last year, Party Conference voted overwhelmingly in favour of maintenance of the nuclear deterrent. Yeah. So why aren't we hearing a defence of the government's motion from the dispatch box now?
Yeah. Party policy is also to review our policies. That is why we have reviews.
Across Scotland yesterday, there were demonstrations against Trident. Some polling suggests opinion in Scotland is actually split. But 58 of Scotland's 59 MPs oppose the deterrent. The SNP's parliamentary leader demanded more detail on the real running costs.
We've asked again and again and again, and I'm looking at the Defence Secretary again, and he has the opportunity to intervene on me now again to tell the House, to tell Parliament how much money his government wishes to invest in the successor programme.
Blank cheques. Blank cheque following.
Update. There came none.
Checks.
The total bill, including running costs, is thought to be more than £180 billion. The SNP said on the heels of a Brexit vote Scotland didn't support, imposing the successor nuclear fleet on Scottish soil at Faslane Naval Base would be yet another dangerous flouting of Scotland's will.
It will be for the Scottish people to determine whether we are properly protected in Europe and better represented by a government that we actually elect. At this rate, that day is fast approaching.
Another SNP MP asked Theresa May the question all Prime Ministers must face.
Is she personally prepared to authorise a nuclear strike that could kill 100,000 innocent men, women and children?
Yes. And I have to say to the honourable gentleman, the whole point of a deterrent is that our enemies need to know that we would be prepared to use it.
It is an indiscriminate weapon.
His answer to that question is an emphatic no, which means as long as Jeremy Corbyn's in the job, Labour's policy has been effectively neutralised already, just adding to tensions in a party at war.
Well, in Barrow, work has already begun to replace the 4 Vanguard submarines which carry Trident missiles, with investment worth hundreds of millions of pounds in the shipyard and across the town. Tonight's vote, though, has highlighted a Labour Party divided. So in a town that currently votes Labour, how much does that matter? Our North of England correspondent Kieran Jenkins has been to find out.
Nowhere in Barrow is far from the huge hangars where Britain's submarine fleet is forged. In the decision to replace Trident, no town has a greater stake.
The Commons is voting on this tonight. Yeah, I mean, my fingers are crossed.
This is a workforce well aware that Labour's leader will vote against this evening.
Put the units together.
Work that would see Peter through to retirement.
Do you appreciate Jeremy Corbyn's viewpoint, where he's coming from? Can you see it? Yeah, I can see it, but I just don't agree with it. I don't agree with anything that Jeremy Corbyn's about. Now, this, you suspect, is a site that would make Jeremy Corbyn's heart sink. That building there that's shooting up is where the parts for the new submarines will be put together. Labour's infighting rather obscures the fact that hundreds of millions of pounds have already been spent on replacing Trident. The decision has already been taken.
The next submarines they make here will be the replacements. The steel has been bought, £5 billion is already being spent. So if the vote is really about exposing divisions within Labour, it would seem to be working.
There you go, we've got the spoons ready.
At the Profit family home, Alec's wife has already left for work at BAE. He's a councillor who voted for Jeremy Corbyn for Labour leader, but says he wouldn't again.
Certainly on the doorstep, I think people fail to understand that principled stance, because round here it's bread and butter. It's so vital to the local economy. Everyone relies on it in some way, shape or form.
Among Corbyn loyalists, though, there is enthusiastic support for making the current fleet of nuclear submarines, completed in the 90s, our last. The previous leader to back unilateral disarmament was Michael Foot.
I couldn't vote for him. No, impossible.
Barrow and former ship worker John Short responded by voting Tory.
I firmly believe in a nuclear deterrent because if you're at school and you get a bully bullying you, if you just take it, they're going to keep doing it. But once you hit them back, they think, this guy can hurt me.
Each missile, in fact, has the force of 8 Hiroshimas. And the bill for the new submarines, £40 billion, just for starters. But there are jobs in the supply chain, lots of them.
For my town and for myself, I need this job. This is my life.
What would happen here if Jeremy Corbyn became Prime Minister?
I don't know. I hope that doesn't happen.
The vote may be symbolic, but in Barrow and in the battle for the soul of the Labour Party, it couldn't mean more. Kieran Jenkins, Channel 4 News, Barrow.
Well, Labour MPs were busy this afternoon at the hustings for the party's leadership race, with at least one call for a single unity candidate to challenge Jeremy Corbyn. Gary Gibbon has more. So, Gary, there's been a development on that unity candidate, hasn't there?
That's right. The two candidates who are vying for the slot to take on Jeremy Corbyn, Owen Smith and Angela Eagle, have come to an agreement tonight that only one of them will go ahead, and they've worked out the mechanism by which that will be decided. Whoever gets the most nominations from their fellow Labour MPs is the name that will go forward. Now, this doesn't mean entirely that peace and love has broken out, even in that wing of the Labour Party, because I think there's going to be a little process now while both MPs go through the nominations and just double check that someone's name didn't accidentally perhaps appear who didn't mean their name to appear on the list of nominations. But by 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, Jeremy Corbyn will know who he faces, and some MPs, some Labour MPs who I've seen in a very, very low state in recent months are saying they are now daring to dream, hoping to dream that maybe there is a viable challenge that could happen. Of course, we know Jeremy Corbyn has enormous support amongst the grassroots. This is by no means a done deal as a victory for them.
Well, on the other side of the Commons, this was the first appearance at the dispatch box of the new Prime Minister, wasn't it?
Yes, and even Labour MPs I spoke to were saying they felt Theresa May grew in the job, as it were, looked taller, seemed very much in command of the House. She took no prisoners, I have to tell you. When the Green MP, Caroline Lucas, got up, she snapped back at her, some of you people are the first to defend our country's enemies. David Cameron wandered in, sat on the back benches for a bit, but the real theatre here, the intended spectacle, was the disarray on the Labour benches, everybody going in different directions, everybody attacking each other, and on that Labour did not disappoint.
Gary, thanks very much. Well, one MP who's publicly expressed her frustration over Jeremy Corbyn's leadership is Thangam Debonair, who revealed in a detailed post on Facebook how she was offered a frontbench job, then sacked from it the next day, all without being told, and while she was having treatment for cancer. Well, she joins me now. It's a curious story, this. What exactly happened?
Well, I'd been through chemotherapy and an operation, and I was starting radiotherapy on the 14th of January, and that afternoon I discovered, via journalists phoning my office, that somebody thought I was the Shadow Arts and Culture Minister. Now, I didn't take their word for it. I phoned up the Labour Whip's office and discovered that, in fact, Jeremy Corbyn was supposed to have told me. He'd neither told me nor asked me. Now, that was fine. I decided after some sort of consultation that I would shoulder that and take it on. I mean, it wasn't the best timing. I could really live without it, but it was a role which I considered myself really well suited to. I have an arts background, and it was a good fit for my constituency, very arty, and I thought my members, Labour members, would be really happy that I was supporting Jeremy, and I wanted to serve. Now, that was tricky, but 6 weeks later, I discovered that actually the very next day, he'd actually given that job back to somebody else. Person who thought it was their job in the first place and who had not unnaturally felt a little bit irked.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn's office says that's all entirely false and that you were never sacked.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it, that they seem to be accusing me of being a liar. I mean, they press released that they'd appointed me. They know they didn't ask me first. They absolutely know this, as does Jeremy. And they also know that the very next day that the person who thought it was her job came and asked for it back again, not unreasonably. But nobody thought to tell me. Jeremy himself, in the end, had to tell me 6 weeks later, after weeks and weeks of people saying to him, you need to phone Thangam and let her know, because meanwhile, I'd been working on that role.
What does it say about Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, do you think?
It says that communication isn't his strong point, I think, to say the least. And, you know, failure to make a very simple phone call. I mean, this is a really junior post, Cathy. I mean, what does it really matter, I suppose, to
So maybe
many
he's just a
people?
bit disorganised.
A bit disorganised, in charge of the Labour Party. We need someone who's going to be a Prime Minister in waiting. What this country really needs, especially after the disastrous referendum result, is someone who is a Prime Minister in waiting who's going to take us into a Labour government.
Well,
Someone-
the Labour grassroots think that he is a Prime Minister in waiting, or at least they voted for him with a massive mandate.
Yeah.
Are you not being undemocratic in trying to remove him in this sort of coup?
I respect the fact that people felt really enlightened and inspired by Jeremy. And, you know, I share many of his beliefs. I, too, want to nationalise rail service. I, too, feel really strongly about some of the issues that he campaigns on. But that does not a leader make. Just having the majority of the votes doesn't mean that you're automatically leadership material. And what's marked out Jeremy's leadership, not just me, but many other people as well who are starting to speak out, is that he has a failure to speak to, listen to, communicate with, or even work with, on a very basic level, people on his front bench.
Well, it remains to be seen whether the grassroots agree with you or back Jeremy Corbyn again. If he is re-elected after all this leadership challenge performance, are you someone who might contemplate joining a breakaway party, splitting from the rest of the Labour Party?
No, I don't want to get into that because I'm Labour through and through. As
So
I
you'd
know,
support him?
I want a Labour Party that's united, and that's why I'm really hoping that the party will get behind Angela Eagle to run against Jeremy Corbyn and to win. Because
But if
Angela's
she
got a plan.
fails, would you just
big
sort of
if.
grudgingly support Jeremy Corbyn?
I don't believe Angela's going to fail. I think she's going to do a fantastic job, and I believe that she's going to be the next leader of the Labour Party
if
and
she's
the
not?
first Labour Prime Minister. And that's a big if. And I'm hoping that enough people have realised just how poor Jeremy's communication skills are and just how much that matters if you're really going to be the leader of Her Majesty's opposition.
Thangyam Debonnaire, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
International Olympic chiefs have promised the toughest sanctions available after a damning report found Russia covered up hundreds of positive doping tests across a vast range of sports. The head of the International Olympic Committee said the allegations showed a shocking and unprecedented attack on the integrity of sport and the Games. Now, if you've got a mobile phone, the chances are it's powered by a chip created by a British technology company, Arm Holdings. It's big business. So today, a Japanese company has agreed to pay top dollar, or £24 billion to be precise, for it. The government called it a clear vote of confidence in the UK after the turmoil of recent weeks. But just before becoming Prime Minister, Theresa May suggested she'd try and block foreign takeovers of top British companies. So why the apparent change of heart? Our business editor, Siobhan Kennedy, is here. Is this a change of heart, do you think, by the Prime Minister?
Well, I think that's a question, Cathy, many people will be asking today. You know, it was just a week ago, as you said, that the Prime Minister promised greater scrutiny of foreign takeover bids. Yet here, a week later, we have a massive foreign takeover bid and seemingly no scrutiny at all. Theresa May has decided that this deal is in the national interest, whereas others, like Kraft, Cadbury or Pfizer's bid to buy AstraZeneca, were not. But that's not clear why, because many people see Arm as the jewel in the crown of Britain's technology industry. Its chips power 95% of the world's smartphones. Just the kind of company you would think in the teeth of an economic downturn that we should hold and nurture. Or is it easier to present this deal as a vote of confidence in Britain? Well, the Prime Minister clearly thinks it is.
Well, is it coincidence, then, that this has just happened after Brexit, that this is when SoftBank has swooped?
Well, SoftBank would say no. Its chairman today acknowledges that the fall in the pound relative to the Japanese yen has made the deal cheaper, but it also points out that Arm's share price has risen commensurately since Brexit because Arm's revenues are all booked in dollars, so the two things cancel each other out. It's clear that SoftBank does want to own Arm to give it a leg up in the next big internet boom of connected devices everywhere. But it's also hard to believe, Cathy, isn't it, that so close to the decision of the UK to leave Europe, that these two things are not themselves connected?
Siobhan, thanks very much. Well, one of the developers of Arm's microprocessors is computer scientist Sophie Wilson. Starting her career as the designer of the Acorn microcomputer, she revolutionised computer technology in the 1970s and 80s and paved the way for a computing revolution as mobile phones conquered the globe. There are now 80 billion of her chips worldwide in thousands of consumer electronic products that rely on the Arm technology she developed. And tomorrow she'll be given the prestigious Mullard Award by the Royal Society in recognition of her work. And she joins me now from her home in Cambridge. So, Sophie, these chips, these ARM processors, were your babies, weren't they?
Yes, Steve Fairburn, myself, whatever it was, 1983 to 1985, designed the first ARM processor. I designed the instruction set and Steve made the first implementation, the ARM1. So 24th of April 1985, there it was, working chip.
And your first foray into tech was making an electronic cow feeder for a farmer in Harrogate. I mean, how did you get from that to making chips that are now in everybody's mobile phones?
Well, it turns out that making a microprocessor is just making a very complicated form of digital logic. Steve and I had worked together on things like the BBC microcomputer, and we knew how to make digital logic and make it work. So making a microprocessor was just an extension of that, a bit harder, a bit more drawn out, more thinking to do, but that's what it was.
So do you see this sale today, with some sadness, or do you see it, as the government does, as a vote of confidence in Britain?
You can take it either way, can't you? I mean, SoftBank clearly view ARM as a very strong company. They're betting on the future for Internet of Things, and that's what they think makes their investment in ARM worthwhile. They know they mustn't affect ARM very much, because what's made ARM great is this ARM ecosystem where they collaborate with every advanced silicon manufacturer across the world. ARM may design all the intellectual property that's in your smartphone and your Wi-Fi chips and so on, but other companies like Qualcomm, Intel, Broadcom, Apple actually make the chips. So this ecosystem is a very important thing, and SoftBank mustn't wreck it.
But if it's so important as it seems to be, wouldn't it be nice for the UK to keep that? I mean, this is what the Prime Minister seemed to be indicating just before she became Prime Minister, that, she'd block foreign takeovers of jewels in the crown.
Well, I don't know. And obviously the government has the power to block it. SoftBank have said that they intend to keep all the UK headquarters and the staff, and to grow the staff in the UK and to put investment in. Those are useful things to happen. It may be more difficult for ARM to achieve that by itself without SoftBank's resources behind it.
Sophie Wilson, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, from the Republican convention here in Cleveland, Ohio, you will join us again after the break, when we'll be looking at some of the things that the delegates are saying. And there's a different kind of party activists here, the Trump-supporting delegates who've come to rally for their man. I've been finding out why. Welcome back to Cleveland. So what is it that has provoked predominantly white, middle-class Republican delegates to move to anoint Donald Trump, a political novice, as their standard-bearer for the presidency? Alienation, malaise, sheer despair with the Democratic alternative, Hillary Clinton? I've been out of the confines of this vast arena to downtown Cleveland, on the shores of the Great Lakes, among relaxing delegates, in an attempt to explain their Trump enthusiasm. The security may look as if it's come from neighbouring Canada, but they're as American as the Republican delegates. The banner is mainstream Trump.
Hopefully he's going to make America great. I mean, by doing what? Hopefully bringing jobs here, closing the borders, making America more safe. So
That'll be a job building that wall, won't it?
I think it will be a big job.
Do you think he'll do it?
I'm hoping so.
Yeah, it will be very different from any convention I've ever been to.
Does that worry you?
No.
He's managerial and a Trump supporter. But is the woman with him? And are you attracted to Trump? I love the pause. I don't want to get into this. Is it a marriage, I guess?
It's a marriage, yes.
So, are you attracted to Trump?
Well...
Thank you for your service. Hey, thank you, Willis. We'll see you in a minute.
Well, I don't think the alternative is one that I can support.
But what's this? Not delegates, but real locals having a beer. Where are you on the big question?
What's the big question?
Well, who's going to be the President of the United States?
George Bush, third term.
None of the above?
Trump might be a push.
Hillary Clinton will be the President of the United States.
Keep your voice down.
I know, that's why I'm talking quietly.
Do we get to ask questions? What do you think of Brexit?
How do you see Brexit as being related to Trump?
Well, I think you have a core of people that have seen for 30, 40 years that they haven't advanced in the middle class. And a lot of that, of being open world trade, now you sit there and say, was that really good for me?
We're from Detroit, and we know a lot of blue-collar Democrats, and they are excited about Trump. As a matter of fact, some of them say, some of them will say, I'm not voting for a Republican or a Democrat, I'm voting for Trump.
Right.
So you know what? Let's give somebody else who's not a politician, give him a chance. Let's face it, he's run a very multi-billion-dollar business. Okay? So he's a very smart man. So let's go with a smart man.
He's went bankrupt, I've gone bankrupt, but at least I did it.
Just along the street, this striped T-shirt clothes royalty.
I'm a relation to Queen Victoria's family.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
And so you're both Queen Victoria and Trump.
Well, I'm a Brexit American supporter of the Brexit vote. And yeah, of course, Trump-Pence.
Trump-Pence, a first reference to the new ticket. But somewhere beneath the endless stream of big-screen news babble, we stumble into the niece of the Republican Party's last presidential candidate, Mitt Romney, Rona Romney McDaniel. Are you serious?
Yes.
You are his niece?
I am his niece.
Have you managed to move from Uncle Mitt to Donald Trump?
I am a Donald Trump supporter. I am the chair of the Michigan delegation. We are here to nominate him.
Have you checked in with your Uncle Mitt of late? Is he a Trumpist?
My Uncle Mitt has not come around yet. We're working on him. We're working on him. But yeah, of course, my Uncle Mitt supports me. He's chosen not to endorse, but we're hoping he'll get
Do you
there.
think you'll bring him round before Election Day?
I wouldn't bet on it, but I'm going to keep working on it.
Well, Kylie Morris joins us again now in this arena. A lot of senators haven't turned up, a lot of congressmen refused next. Is there going to be a rebellion here of any sort?
Well, perhaps that's why the music is so loud to drown out any dissent, John. But no, I think they've already had an effort to try and unbind delegates so they can vote with their conscience. That has failed. We may see a little bit of back and forth this afternoon. But Donald Trump has been very good at branding this event. I mean, there's a Trump family member speaking every night this week. He's branded the convention.
The Von Trump family singers.
The Von Trump family singers, indeed. But it simply means that he's taking the kind of branding, the approach that he's taken throughout the campaign and continuing it. It's working for him, so why would he stop?
Kylie Morris. Well, from Kylie and from me here in Cleveland, from Lindsay and Jonathan in Istanbul, from Porrick in France, from Kathy in London, that's Channel 4 News. We'll be back at 7 tomorrow night. Good evening.